She chose him, and I stepped back, not because my love for her had vanished, but because her heart no longer reached toward mine. When someone's affection drifts elsewhere, clinging doesn't make sense. You release. It wasn't a dramatic, chaotic breakup. No shouting. No desperate pleas. We sat in the familiar corner of our favorite café, at the same worn table where we'd shared countless mornings. But we weren't the same. I need space, she said softly, her fingers wrapped around her mug. But her eyes betrayed her. It wasn't space she wanted. It was distance. Distance from me, from us, from everything we'd built together. I could have pressed, demanded explanations. But why ask when your gut already knows? I nodded quietly, said almost nothing, because sometimes silence speaks louder than love ever could. I remember the sound of the spoon clinking against her cup, the hum of other conversations round us, the way the waitress smiled as if nothing had just ended. That's the cruelty of breakups. The world keeps moving while yours is falling apart. I left without ceremony, only the soft echo of my shoes across a floor that no longer felt like ours. The familiar street outside had changed too. The bakery we used to visit, the bookstore across the corner, they suddenly became foreign. Places I couldn't step into without feeling her absence press against my chest. The days after were heavy, oppressive. I stopped checking my phone. I muted her laugh in my memory. I told myself I'd get through this, that dignity mattered more than begging someone to stay when their heart was already gone. But dignity doesn't warm your bed at night. It doesn't answer the questions that circle your mind at 3 a.m. So I wrote in silence, journal pages filled with words I'd never send, thoughts I couldn't speak aloud. Anger never came, only grief, a slow, aching grief that felt like mourning someone who was still alive. And maybe that's worse because you know they're out there, laughing, moving on, while you're left with the ghost of what used to be. That's when I made the quietest, hardest decision of my life, to walk away without protest. To leave behind not just her, but the spaces, the habits, the comfort we built together. I refused to chain myself to memories that no longer wanted me. The days that followed blurred into one long silence. Morning coffee lost its taste. Nights stretched endlessly. It felt like grieving without a funeral, no closure, no condolences, just absence. Friends asked how I was doing, but I deflected with vague excuses. I'm fine, I'd say, when I wasn't. Just tired, when exhaustion wasn't the problem. I didn't want their pity. I didn't even want their advice. I wanted her back, but I also knew I couldn't have her. Then came the detail I hadn't asked for but somehow knew would come. She hadn't left me for freedom, or self-discovery, or the cliched space she'd asked for. She had left me for someone specific, a man from her gym. I saw them once by accident, his hand resting lightly on her back, her head tilted toward him in a way she once leaned toward me. My stomach didn't twist with rage, it just sank. What hurt wasn't the betrayal itself. It was how easy it seemed for her, how seamless the transition was, like stepping out of one coat and into another. While I was still shivering in the cold, I didn't lash out. I didn't confront her or him. Instead, I turned inward. I stopped going to the cafe. I deleted her playlist from my phone. I avoided the gym, the restaurants, the side of town we used to walk. I began cutting her out of my routines, one thread at a time. Though every cut stung. At night, I filled notebooks. Words poured out like confessions. I wrote about her laugh, about the way she held her breath before answering hard questions, about the hollow space on the couch where she used to curl up with her tea. Writing didn't heal me, but it gave shape to the ache. Slowly, I rebuilt. I changed my routes to work. I found a new coffee shop, one where no memory of her lingered. I started running in the mornings, not to chase away the pain, but to remind myself that my body could move forward even if my heart lagged behind. She was out there living, smiling, maybe even loving again. And I was here, learning the hardest lesson. Some people move on quickly because they were already gone long before the goodbye, alone, but functioning. That's how I describe myself. The grief was still there, but it had dulled, like a scar that no longer throbbed every time you touched it. I reshaped my life in small, almost invisible ways. New routines, new places. I stopped visiting the cafe we'd loved. I stopped walking down streets that echoed with her footsteps. Music was the hardest part. There was one song she had picked for me, a song she swore fit us perfectly. I used to play it on repeat, like a private anthem. One morning, it came on shuffle. My hand froze on the phone. For a moment, I let it play. Then I shut it off, mid-chorus, and deleted it from every playlist. It felt like cutting out a splinter that had been buried too deep. Painful, but necessary. The question began to haunt me. Will I become the man who waits forever? I'd seen men like that, still orbiting around old loves, unable to move forward. I didn't want to live as a shadow of who I was with her. There was an internal shift, subtle but real. Grief began to calcify into resolve. Not bitterness, just a quiet understanding that love couldn't define me anymore. At least not her love. I picked up books again, ones I'd abandoned during the relationship. I joined a writing group. I even said yes to a hiking trip I would have once declined. I wasn't chasing distractions, I was reclaiming parts of myself that had gone quiet. There were still nights I felt the weight of her absence. Still mornings where I reached for a phantom warmth that wasn't there. But each time, I reminded myself, I'm not the man who lingers. That choice wasn't about strength. It was about survival. Because waiting for someone who walked away is just another way of letting yourself disappear. It was a rainy Sunday, the kind where the sky seemed to sag under its own weight. I had a new routine now: buy a book on the weekend, linger in the quiet of the shop, then take coffee to go. That day, arms full, I stepped out into the downpour, the smell of wet pavement filling the air. I was fumbling with my keys when I saw her. She was standing by my car, drenched through, her hair plastered to her cheeks. No umbrella, no jacket, just raw, exposed fragility I never thought I'd see in her. For a moment, I froze. My instinct was to turn away, to vanish before she could speak. But she lifted her eyes, and in them was something that pinned me in place. I was wrong, she said. Her voice nearly drowned out by the rain. The words cracked something inside me. Not walls, not completely, but they left fissures. I wasn't angry. Strangely, I wasn't even triumphant. What I felt was distance, the kind you can't cross just by showing up. Still, I unlocked the car. She slipped in beside me, dripping water onto the seat. The silence that followed was almost unbearable. No music, no heater, just the drumming of rain on the roof and the sound of her breathing. I didn't ask her why she came. I didn't reach for her hand. I simply sat there, feeling the collision of past and present in the cramped space between us. My heart wasn't racing like it once would have. It was steady, cautious. Letting her into the car didn't mean letting her back into my life. I knew that. But part of me wanted to hear what she had to say, if only to understand why ghosts sometimes knock on doors they once slammed shut. We sat there in silence, the rain softening from thunder to drizzle, as if the sky itself was waiting for her to speak. Her hands trembled in her lap, not from cold, but from something heavier. Finally, she exhaled, and the words tumbled out. It wasn't what I thought. With him, with that life, it was hollow. I stared at the windshield, watching droplets race each other down the glass. I didn't rush her. I didn't even look at her. Once, I would have given anything for her words. Now, they landed differently, like echoes in a room I'd already left. She talked about the nights she'd felt lonelier in someone else's arms, about the guilt that shadowed her when she laughed at his jokes, knowing I'd once been the man who made her laugh that way. She admitted she had convinced herself she was missing something with me, only to learn that the something she wanted wasn't real. I made a mistake, she whispered. Her voice cracked, raw with regret. I listened, but I didn't cry. I had already shed those tears alone, months ago, when the wound was fresh and gaping. Now, I was scar tissue, tender, but no longer bleeding. For a long moment, I wondered if this was what I had wanted all along: her remorse, her confession, her words. But the truth was, I felt no victory in it. There was no satisfaction in seeing her broken. If anything, I pitied her. She reached for my hand. Hesitant, I let her fingers graze mine, but I didn't clasp them back. I couldn't. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Regret is powerful, but it isn't always enough to rebuild what's been destroyed. The car had grown stuffy, heavy with everything unsaid. She shifted in the seat, twisting her hands together like she was bracing against herself. Then her voice cracked open again. Please, just one more chance, she said. I miss how you saw me. I miss being seen. Her words carried desperation, but underneath them, I heard something else: loneliness. It wasn't just about me, it was about the emptiness she'd carried back from her choices. I wanted to believe it was love, but doubt not at me. Was she here because she loved me? Or because she hated the silence of being alone? I didn't answer right away. I stared at the steering wheel, fingers resting still. A part of me, deep down, still remembered the warmth of us, still remembered her hand in mine, the way she used to lean her head on my shoulder. But I wasn't the same man anymore. I had rebuilt parts of myself she'd never see, pieces born from pain and quiet nights she didn't share. Do I even want this version of you? I asked, though it came out softer, more to myself than to her. She blinked hard, tears sliding down her cheeks. I just want to start over. I inhaled deeply, then finally gave her something, not a yes, not a no, maybe. Her face shifted with hope, but she didn't realize that maybe was not a promise. It was a boundary, a door half closed, half open, enough to show I hadn't hardened completely, but not enough to invite her back in, inside me. A truth pressed forward. I wasn't sure anymore if the man who once loved her was still here. She looked at me then, eyes red, searching for some sign that the man she once loved was still in front of her. But something had shifted, not in her and me. I asked myself the question I'd avoided for months. Do I miss her? Or do I miss who I was when I was with her? The answer came like a quiet tide, steady and undeniable. I didn't miss her. Not really. What I missed was the version of myself that existed before betrayal, before silence, before the day she chose someone else. And that version of me no longer existed. She reached for my arm, whispering, "We can fix this," but the words didn't grip me the way they once would have. My chest didn't ache with longing. Instead, there was calm born not of indifference, but of growth. My love for her hadn't fully vanished. But it no longer commanded me. It no longer bent me into someone desperate to be chosen. "I can't," I said finally, my voice even. "Not because you don't matter, but because I'm not the same man you left. And I don't think I want to be him again." Her face crumpled, tears falling faster now. I didn't gloat. I didn't lash out. I simply sat there, steady, watching her realize that some doors don't reopen not out of anger, but out of change. Letting her go this time wasn't about punishment. It was about dignity, about honoring the person I had become through the very pain she caused. And for the first time since she walked out of that café, I felt something close to freedom. The rain had thinned to a mist, tapping softly against the windshield. She wiped her cheeks with the sleeve of her soaked sweater, her voice barely above a whisper. "So that's it?" I didn't answer right away. I watched her, not with anger, not even with longing, just with the kind of clarity that comes when you finally understand the difference between holding on and moving forward. She opened the door slowly, the sound of it creaking louder than it should have. For a moment, she lingered, as if waiting for me to change my mind. But I didn't. I stayed still, anchored. She stepped out into the wet street, her figure blurring under the dim streetlight. I thought I might feel devastated, like the first time she left. But instead, there was only stillness inside me, a quiet peace. She had once held the key to me, but the lock had changed. I sat there after she disappeared into the rain, hands resting on the wheel, heart steady. For once, I wasn't defined by what I'd lost or what I might have regained. I was defined by what I chose. And I chose me. Healing isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself with fireworks or triumphant music. Sometimes it's just the absence of ache, the slow return of breath, the realization that you don't need answers or closure to be whole again. So I stayed in that car a little longer, not rushing anywhere. The rain eased, the night softened, and for the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting for anyone to return, because I already had.